The Indianapolis Colts are in the midst of a feverish search for their next head coach. Chris Ballard said this search would be extensive, and it sure has been up to this point. So let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle podcast presented by Fan Nation on SI.com. My name is Andrew Moore, and I'm joined here by my co host and fellow writer at Horseshoe Huddle, Drake Wally. Drake, how you doing, man? It's been a wild couple weeks. I mean, we on Monday we talked about CJ Stroud and we had our biggest episode ever. And now
Yeah.
we're 2 weeks into this coaching search. We've got a lot of candidates that we're going to be talking about tonight. How are you feeling, man?
I'm feeling really good. It's been very encouraging to see so many candidates get called up and, especially after such an, knee-jerk type decision to hire an interim coach. It's very welcoming to see Ballard leading the search, Ursay kind of saying, "All right, I'm following you," and getting some really, really solid guys to get in front of.
Absolutely. The Colts are doing a very good job, in my opinion, of casting a wide net, getting as many candidates as possible in the building or even just virtually interviewing them and really making this a true extensive search, going out and finding all these very good candidates. Will they end up with one that we like? Will they end up with one that maybe the fan base doesn't so much like? We'll have to see. Stats Matt, good to see you, buddy. Guys, please tell me that Jordan Schultz's report is BS. We'll talk about that report here when we get to talking about Jeff Saturday later. I'll give my thoughts on that. But before we get into all the head coaching candidates here, I really want to send a shout out to all of you guys and thank you all for watching last this Monday's episode. Drake and I have only been doing this for a few months, but it was easily our biggest show ever from Monday. And you guys knocked it out of the park with subscribing, with liking, with watching, had fantastic reviews. So we really do appreciate it. It does go a long way. And since you're here, and if you haven't already, you can join in. Go ahead and go and follow us on Twitter at Colts on FN. Go ahead and like us on Facebook at Horseshoe Huddle. Go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell on YouTube so you know whenever Drake and I are going live, because as we've seen over these past couple weeks, news is flying furiously in regards to the Indianapolis Colts. So there's going to be a lot to talk about. We're going to be dissecting it all over the coming months. So, Drake, without further ado, let's talk some coaching candidates. So the Colts have really, like I said, they've cast a wide net for their candidates. As of right now, the Colts have 12 different candidates that they are looking at for their head coaching position. So we're going to go through each one of those guys one by one tonight, kind of give a little bit of their background, a little bit of analysis on these guys, and then kind of give towards the end of the episode, we're going to give not only our personal favorites, but who we think the Colts are considering as favorites right now. So it's going to be fun as we go through these candidates. Throw in your thoughts on each one of those candidates that we're covering in the chat, and I'll put those up for everybody to see. Should be a really fun discussion tonight. So Drake, you ready, buddy?
Oh yeah, let's go. Fire them away.
Let's dive into it. First, let's go with a guy that's in the building. And not the guy that's in the building that everybody has been talking about, but the other one that I think eventually will be a superstar and a head coach in this league, Bubba Ventrone, Colts special teams coordinator. Drake, what are your thoughts on Bubba? And do you think he could be a good head coach?
Well, kind of like Jeff Saturday, he has the experience too. He's played in the NFL
Mm-hmm.
and he has elevated the special teams play for the Colts every single year that he has been in charge of that, of that side of the ball, if you will. They've had better returning, they've had better special teams tackling, and actually, to quote, I've got it in my notes here to quote our own Zach Hicks. He said that without Bubba Ventrone, you would not have seen Isaiah Rodgers on the squad. So there's also talent scouting that goes into that, idea pitching that goes into that. He knows the organization. He's got the playing. He's got the coaching experience, man. I think really, truly, all he needs is just an opportunity to take a snap at that head coaching gig.
I love Bubba Ventrone. I'm a huge fan of Bubba Ventrone, and he has been a rock star ever since 2018 when he joined the Colts on Frank Reich's staff. He's a guy that gets the most out of his players. Players absolutely love him, and there was multiple guys in that locker room that vouched for him and said that he should get a look at being the next head coach
A
of
good
this
sign, by
team,
the way.
which is a very good sign. He has the locker room support. Bubba Ventrone is a guy that, I mean, like you mentioned, the special teams has gotten better each year. The Colts consistently have one of the better special teams units in the entire NFL, and Bubba Ventrone is a huge part of that. He's actually the guy that Chris Ballard wanted to elevate to be the interim head coach this year instead of Jeff Saturday. So Ballard's a big fan of his. I'm a big fan of Ventrone's, and I don't know if it's going to be this year or not with the Colts, but I think down the road, Bubba Ventrone will be a head coach in the NFL. Ricky Bullock, good to see you, buddy. He says I think he could be a good head coach. And then we'll answer this real quick. Colts loyalist says, with all these interviews, I'm wondering why Flores hasn't been in the mix. And honestly, I think a lot of that probably has to do with the impending lawsuits that he has against the NFL. And whether that's right or wrong, I'm not the person to say, but it is a part of it. When you're suing the NFL and multiple teams within the NFL, that's going to rub some people the wrong way, and you're probably not going to be at the top of those lists. So that's just the way it is in the NFL. Stats Matt also says, and this year without Rigoberto Sanchez as the punter, the Colts were still a very good punt team, very good punt coverage team, and a lot of that can be credited to Bubba Ventrone. So let's move it along to the next candidate here, a guy that kind of held the ship together in an otherwise terrible situation there in Denver. Broncos defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero, a younger coach, but man, he's been a hot name in this coaching cycle. Drake, what do you think of Evero?
There was one thing I had to say about Bubba real quick. He also had Matt Hack as a punter. Okay,
not great.
That's a terrible thing right there. But hey, nothing against Matt Hack, maybe CFL. But I think, man, Evero, you look at the entire season for the Broncos, and we have the Mile High Huddle, that's a part of what we do too. And you've heard them talk about it over and over again, the defense. And the Broncos and the Colts had very similar seasons. They couldn't move the ball, but they both had a defense that could do something. And you can credit a lot of that to Evero. And with his experience, it goes a lot farther back than you'd expect. He's been there, done that. He's been around the league for quite a while. In fact, it goes back to 2007 when he started in the NFL as defensive quality control for Tampa Bay, which I've noticed a lot of these defensive guys, they passed through Tampa Bay at some point in the 2000s where that defense was strong. So this is a solid coach, and he also interviewed very well. He has a leadership mentality. Look, he'd be a great fit for the Colts.
I think he would be as well, just as far as especially the leadership standpoint. Evero is a hot commodity. I mean, he's interviewed with multiple teams for their head coaching vacancy, including the Broncos that where he is now. So I think Evero is somebody that I'm not sure that he'll end up with the Colts head coaching job, but you did mention that his leadership, he is a great leader, and anybody you talk to will echo that. So another great candidate, and I think you're going to notice a theme as we go through these guys. A lot, if not most, are guys that you find yourself saying, man, he's a good candidate, he's deserving, or I wouldn't mind to see him on this team. And that's a good thing. I think Chris Ballard has really put together a really good search, and the more good candidates you have, the more likely you are to pick one that's going to be a successful head coach. Mercedes 18, hopefully I'm saying that right. If not, let me know. Evero more likely to be a defensive coordinator with Morris as a head coach, in my opinion. That's interesting to think about. I don't know if Evero and Morris have connections together, but man, that would be one solid defensive coaching staff if those two linked up. Stats Matt said if the Broncos scored 18 points every game, they would have had 10 wins. That just goes to show you how good Evero's unit was playing on an otherwise terrible team. With everything going on with Nathaniel Hackett and Russ Wilson, you kind of forget that the Broncos had a very good defense, and a lot of credit of for that should go to Ejiro Evero.
Well, and it also comes in a very, I mean, it didn't live up to the expectations that it had, the AFC West. Preseason, they said it was going to be like a desolate wasteland for everybody to enter. It really wasn't, but still, you had to face Patrick Mahomes twice. You had to face Herbert twice. You had to face Carr, who still, I think, has some left in the tank twice. You had to face very difficult competition. You always stood up and actually forced turnovers from each one of those guys in each one of those games, I believe. So just the fact they were able to do that and still not be able to eke out 7, 8, 9 wins just isn't, it's more of a tribute to how bad the offense was than Avero's defense.
And I love when the chat comes and helps me out. Stats Matt, thank you, buddy. Evero came from the Rams last season. Mercedes coming in saying that he worked with Morris, and then Evero or Henderson are most likely defensive coordinators for Morris if Raheem Morris becomes the head coach. So that would be a star-studded staff that the Colts would get on the defensive side of the ball. But let's move it along to a guy that's on the offensive side of the ball, a guy that wasn't really talked about as being a potential candidate, but kind of surprised us all. And it happened on Monday. Eric Bieniemy, or was it not Monday, but maybe it was last Thursday, excuse me, Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs, who now that he's interviewed with the Colts, has interviewed with literally half of the NFL for head coaching vacancies. So Drake, tell me your thoughts on Eric Bieniemy. And do you think he would be a good head coach for the Indianapolis Colts?
Well, my thoughts on Eric Bieniemy is that what you just said needs some context. That's been like over 3 or 4 seasons, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not, he hasn't been traveling, this year doing all those interviews. He's been passed up too many times, for my opinion. Everyone says, don't let, you got to give someone a chance. Well, the NFL is a little different. These are professionals. They know when they turn down somebody. And when you see someone continuously get elevated to the head coaching interview and they can't get past that 3-4 years in a row, it does start to raise flags. Now, I also will say that he's not entirely in control of the offense in Kansas City. You have Andy Reid there, and you also have Patrick Mahomes, who, this is no offense to Bieniemy, I'm sure you could take damn near any offensive coordinator, put him with Mahomes and the style that he plays with Kelsey and all that, you could probably eke out 10, 11 wins, get him to the wild card.
Yeah, I would agree there, because Patrick Mahomes is an otherworldly talent. But and Stats Matt kind of beat me to it. He said Bieniemy is down the list for me. Players coming out against him, I'll ignore his past because it was a while ago, but there is one. Yes, there definitely is a past, a checkered past with Eric Bieniemy. From what I've heard, he hasn't been prepared in these head coaching interviews in the past. He hasn't interviewed very well in these interviews. And you're right. He's not somebody that really owns the offense, because it is Andy Reid's offense, one of the greatest head coaches the NFL has ever seen. So that he is a risky candidate, and he's a guy that you might not be there. There's a reason why, after he, as Colts loyalist says, 15 interviews later, he still doesn't have a gig, and hasn't. It's not only that he doesn't have a gig because he's been turning them down. It's because he hasn't gotten offered a head coaching gig. So definitely something to think about if you're on the Bieniemy train. Ricky's got a question. Which quarterback would you like to have? I'm new here, forgive me. It's okay, Ricky. We haven't really talked too much about quarterbacks yet. But we're gonna get into some quarterback talk here after the head coaching cycle ends, because Drake and I have talked privately about this. We've got some disagreements in this quarterback class, and you know what? It's going to be a fun debating those guys over those next few months. So, Ricky, I'm sorry, buddy. You're just going to have to come back to see which quarterbacks we like. But let's move it along to a guy that I think a lot of Colts Nation, a lot of Colts writers have really gotten behind, and myself and Drake included. Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. Drake, I know you're super high on him. You wrote a piece about Raheem Morris today. What's this guy got? What do you like him so much?
Well, Raheem Morris he's got ridiculous experience. I mean, he everyone talks about his, I believe it was 17-31 record, okay, at Tampa Bay through 2009, 2011. I'm going to put some context into that. He was 32 when he was
Mhm.
hired. Unprecedented at that time. He got thrown in with Josh Freeman. If you don't remember Josh Freeman, that's fine. A lot of people
Hey,
don't.
Josh Freeman, former Colt,
He's a former Colt for, I think it's for one
for
game.
one game.
But hey, look, at the end of the day, I'm not going to like bore people with stats. He took a guy, in layman's terms, he took a guy who was not even really a roster spot sometimes. He was more of a practice squad quarterback. And he got him to a 10-6 finish, to the best career he had ever had. Raheem Morris has coached the defense. He's coached wide receivers. He's been in charge of he's helped coach the play calling. One of those years that he was helping coach play calling and the wide receivers, Matt Ryan and Dan Quinn went to the Super Bowl with Julio Jones. Okay, then he takes the Rams defense last year, locks down everybody, finishes out Joe Burrow, wins the Super Bowl. It's really, really hard to not look at Raheem Morris and say, dang, man, now that Ben Johnson, who was a lot of people's high up number one, boy, it's almost like it's not even close for me. I feel like Raheem Morris's experience and his just overall feeling with players, it just fits.
Raheem Morris is a very intriguing candidate for more than one reason. He, like you mentioned, he got his first head coaching gig when he was 32, and he's been working to try to get another opportunity since. And now he's in his 40s. He has worked, like you said, he doesn't just have one side of the ball that he's worked. He's worked both offense and defense. Now, I'm not going to say I'm going to sit here and say he's an offensive guru or he's a defensive guru, but you've seen over the last few years, wherever Raheem Morris has gone, things have gotten better. They just have, and with his turn in Atlanta, even stepping in as the interim head coach when Dan Quinn was fired. Hey, Raheem Morris finished 4-7, three more wins than Jeff Saturday had as a head coach or as an interim head coach.
With
But
arguably a worse team.
right, right. And the thing about Raheem Morris too, that and this is what a lot of people miss about these head coaching hires. It's not only the head coach that they need to hit on, but it's also the staff that they can bring with them. And Raheem Morris just has so many connections throughout the league. Stats Matt says it. I'll say this again. Morrison Henderson screams awesome. Eric Henderson, the defensive line coach for the Los Angeles Rams, who would be a candidate to be the defensive coordinator under Morris with Ejiro Evero and some other guys, Gus Bradley even. Henderson also has a sweet connection to another Colts podcast, the Saddle Up podcast with Shad and Destin. We'll give them a quick shout out, but it's the stats Matt says Morris stepped into a team with 0 wins as the interim too. Colts loyalist. This list Morris brings to the table should be impressive. It would help the team keep things going if the team is successful and gets picked through for advancements. And that's going to be key. Is especially when you have a young quarterback and you have guys that are picked to go be head coaches elsewhere. And I think this is one of the big downfalls that happened to Frank Reich is when Nick Sirianni got picked and Matt Eberflus got picked, the assistants that replaced them weren't necessarily the best. Gus Bradley probably good, but Marcus Brady probably not the best. Scott Milanovic as quarterback coach probably not the best. So you're going to need to continue to replenish those assistants, especially if they go and get other opportunities elsewhere. But yeah, Raheem Morris I think would be a very good hire for the Indianapolis Colts. And then the next guy, this one's going to be quick. This one is a lot of people's number one choice, Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson. But he informed the team on Tuesday. He informed all teams that he is going back to the Lions to be their offensive coordinator. Sad day. He got a nice pay raise according to some sources. So hey, good on him. But yeah, sad to see Ben Johnson head back. And before we talk about any other candidates, I forgot to say this. A lot of people have been saying that Raheem Morris, a lot of people have heard that his interview with the Colts went very well. I'm hearing the same exact thing from some people that I know within the organization. So it's good to see that Morris is making an impression very quickly on Ballard and the Colts.
Yeah, well, and also to go back to your point on he has just it's like interlining connections. He's basically got someone almost in every, it seems like every single organization that knows him somehow. And he's really looking to pull some of those guys away from the Rams. I think a couple of guys, one of which was the offensive play coordinator, or like play calling assistant with the 49ers and the Rams. So if he does get inevitably, put into the role, it's going to be interesting to see who he brings along with him.
Absolutely. Let's move along to the other Lions coordinator, that guy that is interviewing for the Colts job, defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. Glenn has not taken his name out of consideration, so he is still being considered there. Glenn's a guy that a lot of people aren't really talking about. So Drake, I think Glenn he's one of the older candidates the Colts are looking at. What do you think about Glenn?
Three-time Pro Bowler, played in the, I think he played in the NFL for a total of, I think it was like 12, 13, 14 years. And he was a very solid player, very tenacious. But everyone talks about that Detroit's defense was terrible. Now it was, but they also had like 3 or 4 rookies starting on that defense. And they still at times were able to make plays. And, I listened to a couple different podcasts kind of describing him, and he is a natural leader. He's a natural born leader. He's got that Jeff Saturday hold you accountable approach, but he has the coaching experience on the other end of it. And most important of all, he does have the respect of all of the players.
I think what stands out about Aaron Glenn is not only was he a player, not only has he been a coach, but he spent some time in a front office role as well. So he's literally been in all 3 areas of an NFL franchise, which is kind of unique amongst these candidates. He did start to turn that defense of the Lions around towards the end of the year, like you mentioned. But I think just because he isn't one of the newer candidates and his unit didn't produce at a very high level, that's why he's probably not getting as much consideration amongst the fan base as maybe what he should. Do I think he's one of the favorites? Probably not. But I do think that the Colts would probably like his leadership style and what he brings as a leader to the table. Next on the list is a guy that I think a lot of Colts fans are very high on. A guy that has connections to Frank Reich, Nick Sirianni, Eagles offensive coordinator Shane Steichen. What are your opinions on Steichen?
Well, he's maximized Jalen Hurts' abilities, and he turned his passing technique around. I remember watching him. I remember seeing them go into the wild card against the Bucks last year, and I actually said it to my girlfriend Aubrey. I said, "There's no way. Watch this quarterback right here. He's not going to hit throws. He's going to miss throws. Blah blah blah." 1 year later, we're talking about a totally different offense. He's maximized A.J. Brown. He's turned Dallas Goedert into a legitimate terror on the field. He's a top 3. I think he's the 3rd best tight end in the NFL. I mean, Steichen, he has absolutely flipped around that offense, and I really feel like he could help a young quarterback, especially a rookie.
Wherever Shane Steichen has gone, he has helped the quarterback that he's been coaching. When he was with the Los Angeles Chargers, whether it was Phillip Rivers or Justin Herbert, both of those guys had very good seasons under Shane Steichen. He comes to Philadelphia with Dick Sirianni. Sirianni starts out by calling the plays. The offense isn't going so well. He turns over the play calling duties to Steichen. All of a sudden, you see the offense start to get rolling. All of a sudden, you see Jalen Hurts start to develop into an MVP candidate like he's been this year. And a lot of people don't know this. Steichen's got, I think, 11 or 12 years of coaching experience in the NFL. He isn't one of these 37-year-old guys that has a couple years, 1 year as an offensive coordinator, and they're looking for a head coaching gig. He's done his time. He's came up through the ranks. He's grinded, and you won't hear. I mean, you won't. I read a story by Sports Illustrated earlier this year about Shane Steichen, how well he just tailors his offense to his quarterback's strengths. And I think in today's NFL, you absolutely need that in order to be successful. So Shane Steichen, in my opinion, one of the best options that the Colts could possibly get. StatsMat again coming in here, offensive coordinator for Herbert's rookie year 2, and then from 2011 through 2020 with the Chargers, the last 2 in Philadelphia. So he's got plenty of coaching experience. So, and now we're going to move it along to the guy that completed his interview today, the 8th coaching candidate, Jeff Saturday. The Colts interim head coach went 1-7 this year. Drake, We talked about him a lot and a lot. But give me your analysis on Jeff Saturday. I can pretty much guarantee what it's going to be, but what you think of Mr. Saturday?
Look, I mean, he was offered a head coaching job. As a former player, you're not going to turn that down. I know that there were people that were like, "Oh, well, he accepted it." It's like you likely would have too. I
I
mean,
mean,
that's
I would have accepted it, and I have zero coaching experience.
exactly. And I would have been your offensive play caller. Okay,
Yep,
like
absolutely.
I'm telling you, like it's he took the job. He did what he had to do. Now, here's the thing: the pros. You've got a guy who at least knows the inside of the organization. Okay, and he did get kind of a difficult circumstance, but he also projected that as the reason that he couldn't get anything done. He didn't take any accountability. I hold that press conference with a lot of weight. And I just think that with all of these other candidates, it's just very glaringly obvious that you can't go with Saturday. You got to go with somebody that has the experience, and that's why you've brought him in and you put Ballard in charge of the coaching search.
Right. Ricky says if they are going to keep Jeff, then we should have kept Frank. I mean, there's an argument there because Frank Reich, he had a better record than Jeff Saturday,
Yeah.
and the guy actually had turned seasons around before. Stats Matt says, I just don't see how he can come close to the coaching staff that the rest of the candidates can put together. His connections in the league are thin and even thinner now that Clyde Christensen, who was a member of the Colts coaching staff when Saturday was playing, he retired today. He was on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jeff Saturday just isn't it. Great, great player, great person, terrible coach. I was texting my cousin and said those exact words earlier today. And from everything that I've heard within the building, I mean, yes, Jim Irsay still believes that Jeff Saturday can't be a head coach. That's what Jordan Schultz's report that Stats Matt talked about. That is true. But I think we've all known that. We've known that Jim Irsay does back Jeff Saturday. But I would say the temperature around Jeff Saturday has cooled off considerably since it has in November. Jim Irsay knows that it's going to be a very tough sell to this fan base if you're going to bring Jeff Saturday back. And I can guarantee you this, Chris Ballard is not going to recommend Jeff Saturday to be the next head coach of this team. So unless Irsay completely oversteps his bounds again and picks Saturday, even if Ballard does not recommend him, then we're in a whole different situation where he oversteps Ballard again. Does Ballard leave? The backlash from the fan base, it's wouldn't be good. It would just not be good. And I say this with some optimism. I hope Mr. Irsay knows that to his core, and we aren't talking about head coach Jeff Saturday here in a couple weeks. But again, it's going to be on the table until it's not on the table, and I think that's the best way that I can put it.
Yeah, and on the other side of it, you're gonna draft a quarterback. All right,
Mhm.
you're gonna draft a quarterback, and whether or not you get a guy, and this could be for later, but you get a guy that maybe bridges 1 year for that person if they're not ready. It doesn't matter. You can't. You have to give this quarterback an experienced person who's been in the NFL. They know the inner workings of it, not as a player, as a coach, or they at least understand it to an extent, and maybe they can hit their stride as a head coach. But nothing personal against Jeff Saturday. It just does not make even the slightest bit of sense to hire him back as the head coach of the Colts. Not one bit.
It really doesn't. So those are the guys that have all conducted their interviews so far. We've still got 5 head coaching candidates that haven't conducted interviews. They will either be conducting them tomorrow or this weekend or early next week. And there's some very interesting ones on this list. So let's kick it off. Drake, Giants offensive coordinator Mike Kafka, a big name, big name. He has definitely turned the Giants offense around with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. What do you think of Mike Kafka?
Well, he knows how to work. He knows how to make a quarterback that was criticized for being a bust better in an offense where the running back is the best receiver. You mostly run the ball, and your wide receivers are not only not that high level to begin with, but the top ones are injured for most of the year. You have no tight end. here they are going into the divisional round. You know that team last year that everyone said the Colts, you didn't want to face them in the playoffs. Look, that right now for me is the Giants. It's the Giants and it's the 49ers. Those are the two teams right now you don't want to face. Kafka is very high on my list, and he should also be high on every other Colts fans list as well.
I agree. And there's something that a lot of people aren't talking about is the connection through Kansas City. Mike Kafka was in Kansas City. He was there from 2017 through 2021 and was picked off the staff to be Brian Dable's offensive coordinator this year. Now, him and Chris Ballard did not cross paths, but Chris Ballard is still very, very close to Andy Reid. And he respects the hell out of Andy Reid. And I'm pretty sure that Andy Reid has given Kafka a good word or put in a good word for him. So don't be surprised if Kafka gets a second interview with the Colts. And I think it would be the right move. Stats Matt says Kafka and Will Levis, that's his combination. Not a bad combo right there to lead the Colts into the future. Colts loyalists ask, how difficult do you think it would be to keep Bubba after this process is completed if he's not given the head coaching position? Do any of these candidates make this a more likely result? I don't think not many of them have connections to Ventrone, but the thing about Bubba is he's such a good special teams coordinator. I think any of these head coaching candidates, unless they truly have a candidate in mind that they want, Bubba Ventrone would be at the top of their list. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Colts, in order to keep Ventrone, give him a little pay bump just because of how crucial he has been to this team over the past few years.
Yeah, and special teams is it's truly underappreciated, and the Colts have been at the top of that. And we're talking about a team that hasn't made the playoffs, I think, in 4 out of the last, what is it, 5 seasons? I mean,
Mhm.
so you're talking about a team that continuously plays better and they get better. Eventually, he will get that position, but I do think, kind of like Andrew said, number one, he's just an I love this game kind of guy. He loves the Colts organization, and I do think he deserves, if put in that position to stay in special teams, a little bit of a pay bump for sure.
The next candidate on the list, big name. Big name, 49ers defensive coordinator D'Amico Ryans. In my opinion, my top defensive candidate for this job. Drake, what do you got to say about D'Amico Ryans?
Well, I mean, D'Amico Ryans, he was the 2006 Defensive Rookie of the Year. This is a guy who played very good football for a team that was not really that great. In fact, he's also translated this over to his coaching. He's put that 49ers defense on a level that is so scary that they can bring the pass rush without really even blitzing. They can cover all your receivers, and then they have a almost undrafted quarterback beating your defense. So Ryans would be an absolute win all the way across the board as a head coach. And I also think he would bring in a very solid staff.
Everything that the Colts want in their head coach, I think D'Amico Ryans exhibits. He's a fiery candidate. He's a guy that is very well respected. He's a guy that players love. He demands accountability, and he gets the best out of his players. I mean, yes, that 49ers defense has a lot of playmakers on it. You think of Nick Bosa, you think of Fred Warner, you think of Eric Armstead, but D'Amico Ryans has absolutely taken that defense to another level where they make good offenses look like absolute trash. And I think D'Amico Ryans, he's not only a candidate for the Colts, he's a candidate for the Texans where he played in his playing career. D'Amico Ryans would be a slam dunk hire. No matter what side of the ball you prefer, I think you can't go wrong with hiring D'Amico Ryans. Plus, he would bring somebody from that Shanahan coaching tree, most likely, to be the offensive coordinator and kind of help to really bring forth that quarterback of the future. Stats Matt, a former coach of Buckner, D'Amico Ryans.
Yeah.
And then another coach with big time connections. Ricky also, I like him as a head coach. So I think a lot of fans feel the same way about D'Amico Ryans. The next candidate, Giants defensive coordinator Wink Martindale. He's a guy that's been a very respected defensive coordinator around the league. Definitely would be a big change from the Colts now, as Martindale is known for how much he blitzes throughout the league. Drake, what do you think about Wink Martindale?
I mean, hey, you talk about a guy that looks like the stereotypical "I'm chewing tobacco" and I might swig a couple beers at halftime type guy. That's Wink Martindale,
Tough
but he's
dude.
very tough individual, and you got it from the Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs. I think it was Calais Campbell. I believe it was Baltimore defense. He coached for I think a decade. That was a reign of terror of defense, and now he's gone over to the G men. He's turned them around completely, and you've got the offense with Kafka and the defense with Martindale working on just a even playing field, helping each other out. I do think that he has earned a chance to be a head coach. Does he fit for the Colts? Probably not, but the fact he got an interview is pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie.
I'd agree with that. Last defensive candidate on the list, defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, Dan Quinn. Quinn was the head coach of the Falcons when the Falcons went to that Super Bowl, gave up the 28-3 lead. But he has come back to Dallas, has completely turned that defense in Dallas around. What do you think of Quinn?
I think Quinn has the head coaching experience and also did a great job with Atlanta. I know he got fired. I know he finished 43-42. That's a lot of coaching, by the way. He coached there for like 5-6 seasons. Took them to the Super Bowl. Yes, he lost ultimately, but he lost to arguably the greatest coach and the greatest quarterback. So he's gone to Dallas. He's completely flipped that defense around. They made Tom Brady look pretty daggone washed, if you ask me. So
Mm-hmm.
I think he got a little bit of revenge there. So you've got, I mean, he's more successful than Morris as far as head coaching. I mean, that's probably not only the most successful, but also maybe even the most qualified to lead a team.
Dan Quinn, I think he's ready to be a head coach again. If I had to choose, I think he would probably end up in Denver over Indianapolis.
Yep. Oh
That's what
yeah.
I've been hearing. But I think he has earned another opportunity to do it. I think Dan Quinn is a hell of a coach. And then the last candidate, a guy that the Colts actually just requested to interview, my guy that I have been just pulling for and clamoring for all off season. Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan. Drake, let's talk about Mr. Callahan. What do you think about the Bengals offensive coordinator?
Well, I know that you have a lot to say about Callahan, so I'll make this brief. He's taken Joe Burrow, he's taken Higgins, he has taken Chase, he has taken Mixon, and he has turned that offense into, I think, the most deadly. They have everything they need to win a Super Bowl. They consistently have beaten Mahomes. They probably can beat Josh Allen. Look for that team to probably get right back into the Super Bowl again.
Brian Callahan is the perfect fit, in my opinion, to be the Colts' next head coach. He has worked his way up all the way from the bottom of the offensive staff. He's been in a locker room his entire life because his father, Bill Callahan, was the head coach of the Raiders back when the Raiders went to the Super Bowl in 2002, I think. He's the current Cleveland Browns offensive line coach. Um, and wherever he's gone, he's had success with the quarterback, and none other than Colts legendary quarterback Peyton Manning. When Peyton Manning was there in Denver, Brian Callahan was with him step by step, and Peyton Manning has a lot of good things to say about Brian Callahan, saying he's going to be a back in 2015. He said Brian Callahan would be a good head coach in this league. Now I know Peyton Manning also said that about Adam Gase, but hey, I don't think Brian Callahan represents even a little bit of what Adam Gase was. So you would have to think that, and Stats Matt makes a good point. Wonder if he could pry his dad away too from the Cleveland staff. I would almost guarantee that if Brian Callahan gets the head coaching job, he would ask his dad to be the offensive line coach. And he's one of the most respected offensive line coaches in the NFL. But after the Broncos, he goes to the Lions, turns Matthew Stafford to have 2 very productive years, goes to the Raiders for a season. You see Derek Carr have a career high in yards and completion percentage. Then he comes to the Bengals, and we've seen what he's done with Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and that entire offense with Zach Taylor. So Brian Callahan, and the way he talks as well. And I know we're coming up on close to time, but he talked in an interview. He said, "Why does he coach?" And it's like, well, I coach because I love being able to put players in the best position so the players can go out and succeed. That's exactly what you need out of your head coach. So, hey, I may be fanboying a little bit or going a little over the top, but hey, I think Brian Callahan would be a home run, slam dunk, whatever you want to call it, hire for the Colts' next head coach.
I I absolutely love what he's done in Cincinnati. Joe Burrow's rookie year, he tears his ACL. He comes back the next year, right to the Super Bowl, and then here you go. You're right back in the conversation. You defeat the Ravens in a thrilling game. You're going right up against Allen again. It's just like thank you, football gods. Thank you for all this. But long, hey, lastly, that would be an absolute killer hire for the Colts. Look at what he's done with a team that could not find their footing offensively. That'd be a perfect fit for a rookie quarterback.
Stats Matt asks, do you find it weird that we haven't requested anyone from the Bills, especially Frazier? It has been a little interesting that Leslie Frazier hasn't been requested. Ken Dorsey, the offensive coordinator, hasn't been requested. Do I think that Leslie Frazier still could be requested? Absolutely, I do. But at some point, the Colts are going to need to start narrowing these candidates down because you're up to 12 already. I mean, maybe there could be a couple more requests that come out tomorrow, but eventually you need to start narrowing these guys down and trying to find who's going to be the next head coach for the Colts. But Drake, before we get out of here, who is, I think everybody knows who my favorite is, who I want to be the head coach, but who do you want to be? Who do you want out of these candidates? Who is your favorite to be the next head coach of the Indianapolis Colts?
Oh man, it originally was Ben Johnson, so I'm not going to cry now. I'll cry after the show. But I'm very high, and this me and Andrew disagree about the quarterback about the drafting of the quarterback, which we'll talk about. But we also kind of disagree about the coach. I personally think that Raheem Morris would be my personal favorite. I think though that they would be best if they want to develop a quarterback, go after Mike Kafka.
And I'd say I wouldn't mind either one of those hires. I think Raheem Morris has earned another shot at it. I think Mike Kafka's a very good offensive mind, but give me Brian Callahan all the way. I am in on what he has done throughout his career, and I think he would fit not only the culture in Indy, but I would love to see him with the next quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts and form and mold him into the face of the franchise. So no stats, Matt. We are not going to talk about Dan Dockich. Dan Dockich is an imbecile. I tweeted that out when I was 18 years old. Didn't even tag him, and the man still looked it up and liked it. So that I think that tells you all you have to say about Dan Dockich and what he has to say. But hey, I mean, if his story is true, we need to thank Mrs. McDaniels for steering that snake away from this franchise. And then that's where we're going to leave it for the night. Everybody, hey, we really appreciate everybody coming and following along with us, interacting in the chat. Stats Matt, as always, Colts loyalist. Ricky, a first-time listener. Let's take a look at the other ones here. It's mostly just Stats Matt dominating. Messias, but you guys were all fantastic. Again, please go ahead and follow us at Colts on FN. Go ahead and like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, subscribe and hit the bell on YouTube. Drake, before we get out of here, tell the viewers some of the pieces you're working on for Horseshoe Huddle.
Well, I've been working on a lot, but recently I just released who I think that the quarterback and head coach combo should be. It's an opinion piece, so go look it up. Colts quarterback head coach combo. I'm not going to spoil it. Go read it.
Awesome. I put out a piece about Jeff Saturday, and of course, my guy, Brian Callahan, interviewing for the job. And another thing, this was kind of a fun piece to do, looking back at all the hires from the past 4 years. Should the Colts hire an offensive coach, defensive coach, or does it even matter? So go check that out on horseshoehuddle.com. You can follow Drake at DWalsterDrake on Twitter. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL. And we will be back Monday night right here to talk about more Colts football with you. So we'll see you then.